Hey, this is Frank Meyer, Walkin Cheetahs. You are watching Couch Riffs. Woo!
Hello, folks. My name is Mike Squires, and this is the Couch Riffs podcast, episode number 280. I got the episode number right this time. And my guest this episode is Frank Meyer. You may not have heard of Frank Meyer, but there's a very good chance you've seen him perform. He has played with a who's who list of punk legends. I met him last year while I was touring with Duff McKagan, and he was playing with Lee Ving of Fear. They were doing a acoustic duet called Range War, Lee's other band. I was thoroughly impressed. He told me that country music was way outside of his range when he started doing that, and I was surprised. The shows were great. Frank's a great dude. He had some amazing stories to share. Folks who listen to the podcast know that I am a big Frank Zappa fan, and he tickled me pink with Frank Zappa stories because he, more or less grew up in the Zappa household, friends of the kids there. So, and had some, a lot of direct Frank stories, and an interesting life, and very cool. So, Frank has a new album out now. It's called Living Between the Lines. It is an awesome album. It is sort of a fusion of rock, soul, power pop, and punk. There are sort of ELO moments. There are sweet moments. It's very, very cool record. Go out, give it a listen. And I believe in June he'll be touring in Spain. If you happen to be in Spain, if you're a listener in Spain, go catch him live. He's a great performer. The songs are great, and I'm assuming he will be playing streetwalk, like everything from his past. I don't know, but also he was in Walkin Cheetahs. So you might hear some of that. You might get your garage on. Man, I am caffeinated. Good Lord, I have got the coffee running through me. Woo! Listen, go out, support live music, see bands, buy their t-shirts, be a patron of the arts, buy a painting, support a poet. Whatever. Buy some pottery. I don't know what people do. People do all kinds of shit. Don't just buy stuff on Etsy. That's great. Go to craft fairs, go to flea markets, go where people are making shit and support people. I think things are about to get interesting. So don't forget the golden rule. Treat people the way you want to be treated, and don't be a dick. Frank, welcome to the Couch Riffs podcast.
Thanks, man.
I'm so happy to see you again.
Thanks, man. Yeah.
We got a couple weeks solid hang time on the road late last year.
We did. That was a fun tour. You were out with Duff McKagan. I was out with Lee Ving from Fear, and that was a good time, man.
Yeah.
And you guys had a bunch of different acts on that too. I think Joey from DOA opened up some shows, and it was kind of cool because me and Lee were doing an acoustic country thing, which is different than when we do Fear, because I play in his band Fear as well. And you guys, man, what a dynamic band that really is. Fun. Duff's band is, you guys are great.
We went in right after a tour. Duff was like, let's go record now. We didn't have any songs.
You went in to record right after that tour?
Right after.
Yeah. Well, the band was firing on all cylinders.
We recorded with no material prepared. We recorded 7 songs in 4 days, and it's killer. I'll play you one before we leave.
Yeah, I bet, man. It was fun because I had, right around that time, was kind of plotting what I was going to do live to support my solo record that was coming out in a few months. It just came out now. But at the time, I had a few months. And I was kind of thinking about what do I want to do for that, because I knew I wanted to do some road work for it, but it's a mellower, I wouldn't say it's a mellow album, but it's
pretty rock and roll.
It's pretty rock and roll, but it's definitely a little bit different colors and vibe, a little bit more soulful, a little bit more rootsy than a lot of my work. And I but I also felt like this was an opportunity to like play like songs that I've written, meaning I'm going to do songs off the solo record, but I've got songs from the Street Walkin Cheetahs and Trading Aces and Eddie Spaghetti and James Williamson. And it was like, man, I want to sprinkle that stuff in and kind of start to just, this is my catalog.
Yeah.
But I wasn't sure, like, acoustic, do I do the kind of punky, rocky thing like I'm used to? Do I do keyboards? Watching you guys play, for me, I kind of went, that's what it should, that's what it should be, because you guys were covering a lot of ground, and it was like there was mellow stuff, there was acoustic stuff, there was punk rock stuff, there was rock stuff, but the way that the set list was and the way the ability of the band to be as dynamic as you guys were, for me, I kind of went, and also you had a keyboard player that switched over to guitar, and that was the other thing, is I was kind of going keyboards or guitar, and then when I saw you guys, I was like, oh, it's both. That's the answer. It's both. You got to get a guy who can do both. You got to get a magician. Like I can't do that, but some guys, you know. So I got this guy, Ozzy Carmona, who I met at Fender, which that's originally how you and I met, was when I was still at Fender. And he's an instructor, but he's like a multi-instrumentalist who can play anything and everything. So I was like, oh, I want you on organ on this, and synth on this, and grand piano on this, and ukulele here, and lead guitar here, and rhythm guitar here, and you're gonna switch. And he's like, yeah, man, no problem. I love guys like that.
Oh, that's great.
I would say, yeah, no problem, and then go home and spend weeks and weeks and weeks, training and getting. He's one of these guys, which is like, yeah, man, no problem. Probably takes like 45 minutes, learns the set, and is ready to go.
Well,
maybe not that quickly, but
maybe not. I'll say this, and then we'll jump back in your timeline. There, sure. I hear a lot of different influences coming in. Approach wise and tonally wise, like a lot of hints at different things. I really like the album.
Thanks, man.
It's got a lot of energy. It's almost like a 70s like power pop record, but then it's like, oh, sorta, but not real. Like it's so many things, and I assume it's because you have a load of influences.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely with this record was trying to go a little bit wider than I normally go, in the sense that there's a lot of blues and soul on this record that maybe is not as evident in like the work with Street Walkin Cheetahs or Trading Aces or some of my other bands. So yeah, I think when you listen to a lot of my bands, you can kind of tell, like, well, obviously Stooges, Motorhead, I'm hearing some AC/DC, sure. A lot of my influences are kind of obvious, but, I've always been a power pop fan. I've always been a fan of soul music and R&B, especially from the 60s and 70s. I've always been a fan of blues, like Buddy Guy is a really big influence for me. And there's some artists, and I guess I always use Tom Petty as the best example of a guy who, he's a rock and roll artist, but boy, there's a lot of colors and a lot of styles and a lot of tones and a lot of emotions and dynamics going on a Tom Petty record from any part of his career, the early stuff, the later stuff. And so I've always kind of used him as a bit of a gauge as to, like, if it could work on a Tom Petty record, then it's probably going to be okay,
That's about as American rock and roll as you can get.
Yeah, and granted, some of my stuff with the Cheetahs is probably much more harder driving than some of the Petty stuff. But again, I just use it as a barometer where, like, is there a good hook? Yeah. That's the most important thing. Like, does the song have a good hook? Because even the most intense Slayer song or Motorhead song or whatever has a good hook. That's why you remember it all those years later.
I was just talking to someone the other day, and they were like, Slayer's full of hooks.
Oh, absolutely. Only in South of Heaven. I mean, that's a great hook. You know what I mean? They have one of my favorites. I leave the Bible in a pool of blood so that none of its lives can affect me. I was, whoa, now that's a hook. I mean, it's an insane hook, but it's a hook. But to answer your question, I'll tell you this. When I very first started my first like teenage band, I was 14, called Broken Toys, and we spelled it with a Z, of course, because it was the 80s.
Any umlauts?
No umlauts. Yeah. That was saved for later on. Dweezil, Zappa, Donovan Leitch, River Phoenix, Scott Tunis, and I had a band called Gruen, named after Bob Gruen with the umlauts over the U. So just Gruen. So I had umlauts involved at one point. But Broken Toys with a Z. The first song that we ever covered in like our first garage rehearsal was Bang a Gong by T-Rex. Then we learned Christine 16 by Kiss. Then we learned Bodies by the Sex Pistols. And then we learned Same Old Song and Dance, which was a reach for us because it actually had a groove. Yeah. And, you know, to be perfectly honest, those 4 songs, kind of the blueprint of my entire sound forever and still is. So with all my stuff, it's like there's a little glam, there's a little punk, there's a little heavy metal, there's a little kind of classic rock in there. That's basically my dancing around those styles is my style. With this solo record, I just decided to slow the tempo down a little bit. I wanted the opportunity to take a little bit more time with the vocal, sing a little bit more dynamics in my voice and a little bit more soulful. I wanted guitar solos where maybe I didn't, have to be at like 180 BPMs, stuff where I could let the notes bend a little bit. Just songs that had a little bit more dynamics, really, I guess is the best term. So there's some hard rock stuff on this record, but it's definitely, me and Cherie Curry do a song called Piece of Me that's like very Purple Rain, kind of more of a Prince vibe. Me and Lisa from the Bell Rays do a song that's got a very kind of Al Green, Isaac Hayes sort of thing. Yeah. Those are things you wouldn't hear on my other work, right. And that made this record really fun.
Let's do this. Where did you grow up?
I was born in the Bay Area in Marin County, but I grew up in L.A.
Where in Marin County?
Literally, when I say born, I was born there, and my parents immediately left Marin County. But I believe Marin County Hospital, I believe.
Yeah, and then they were like later.
Yeah, essentially, they moved to Minneapolis and then got divorced. My mom got remarried in Minneapolis. They had my brother. Then we all moved out to Los Angeles, and by the time we moved to LA, I was maybe 4 or 5. So all of my memories are essentially of Southern California. I don't remember living in Marin at all. And my memories of Minneapolis are literally just snow and rain and a kid named Scotty. I had a friend named Scotty, one friend that I recall, and I just remember snow and rain. I have a memory that I was almost struck by lightning, like that I was running through the rain and that lightning struck a manhole right after I stepped on it. But as time's gone on, I'm like, did that happen or did I just dream that? Or is that just one of those little kids like, I'm going to tell mom I got struck by lightning? I don't know. But that's maybe my only solid memory of Minneapolis.
Who cares if it's true?
It's a good story. Yeah. I mean, but so, yeah, I mean, LA, man, I'm an LA kid. I grew up in the Valley during the Valley Girl era. I grew up in Hollywood during the Sunset Strip era, the hair metal era. Right. It was.
Were you an Aquanet kid?
I didn't have cool enough hair to pull that stuff off. I think that's why punk rock. Also, I loved punk and I loved metal. Yeah. So there was a lot. I loved, I was LA. So Motley Crue, Rat, Van Halen, Quiet Riot. I loved all that stuff. But I also heard Fear and the Ramones at a young age and the Cramps and really loved that too. And in the 80s, when I was a kid, everyone had the Aquanet and the sort of the Bret Michaels, David Lee Roth, Vince Neil look. I had, when I was younger, I had very tight curls. Essentially kind of like a white kid afro. Yeah. And that didn't really play into any cool look in the 80s. And what I mistakenly tried to do is I thought that gravity would help me out. And that if I just sort of kept growing, eventually it would like unfurl into this sort of like David Coverdale.
Lion's
like,
mane.
Yeah, like I would look at, pictures of these guys. Eventually it'll get there. But what happened is it just kept going out and I ended up with like a gigantic fro. Yeah. And again, that look worked in 77 or even 97, right. But not in 87.
It's a great look if you're in Rare Earth, but not if you're in Faster Pussycat.
Or Broken Toys with a Z, yeah. Right. So I think that I always kind of was attracted to the lack of fashion and the anti-fashion and the uncoolness of the kind of punk rock and indie stuff. But I always
particularly had, a fashion, but an anti-fashion.
Yeah, and
it
you'd
wasn't
see-
like London punk,
Right, and you'd see pictures of like the circle jerks and the weirdos and stuff, and they looked like weirdos and circle. Like they didn't look cool. I mean, they looked cool because it was so uncool.
Right.
But when you got David Lee Roth over here, and assless leather chaps and this blonde mane, just looking like a rock. Yeah, looking like just a bunch of dudes from San Pedro.
Right.
Like they didn't have a rock star look, but they were rock stars and they were great musicians. I guess the in between would have
close.
Right. The in between would have been Red Cross. They were like both. They kind of were
pizzazz.
Oh, they had pizzazz, but they also had the punk rock roots, and they could kind of go jeans and t-shirt or could go Kiss glam and kind of made it where I love Red Cross. But they were that Neurotica album was one, like I said, for me it was always like punk and glam and metal and classic rock together. That's kind of my sound.
Yeah.
Red Cross was a band that I connected with earlier on because they were also doing that. Cheap Trick to me, Cheap Trick's my Beatles. I actually like Cheap Trick more than the Beatles.
Right.
And I know that's blasphemous to say, but for me, Cheap Trick, because it's a few years later, and I know obviously they're influenced by the Beatles, but their mix of like the pop and the pomp and the hard rock and all that together, that to me is kind of the formula.
Right.
Every album I do, I overtly write a song that's supposed to basically be my Cheap Trick song on that record. Every album I do has a Cheap Trick song, if not multiple. but that's my formula. You got to write at least one Cheap Trick song per record.
That's a good formula.
Yeah.
Why did you guys move to LA? Was it someone in the family in the entertainment industry or peripherally?
Not at that time. My dad, stepdad, but the one that raised us and the one that we went to LA with and stuff, he was a teacher. And so the reason he was there in the first place in Minneapolis is he had a teaching gig, and then he got a teaching gig at USC.
Right.
My mom was a microbiologist, and she got a gig at UCLA, probably to work out with the fact that they were going to move there for his teaching gig. But essentially, they both got gigs, one at USC and one at UCLA. And we moved to LA at first to Venice, and then eventually in the Hollywood Hills. And we were right down the street from the Zappa kids, which had a lot to do with kind of how we ended up becoming friends with them and my connection with those guys, all that stuff. But so we moved there because of that. Then about 8-ish years later, my folks got divorced, and my mom remarried to an entertainment lawyer. And that is another thing that definitely had a lot to do with my brother, who's an actor, and myself, who's a musician. And both of us started really, really young because we had these kind of avenues, or not even avenues, just access, I guess. I mean, Bob, our stepdad, at this point now my second stepdad, and there was more to come. He was the entertainment lawyer for Irving Azoff around the time that Irving Azoff ran Universal and ran the Universal Amphitheater, which became the Gibson Amphitheater, which became the Harry Potter ride at Universal Studios. And so when we were kids, they would take us to these insane shows, and we would always get to go backstage. And I think that, and then also he represented Eazy-E, Yoko Ono, Tom Petty, Ray Parker Jr., all these folks. But he would take us like to a TV set. Like we went to the TV set of The White Shadow, if you remember that show, and just kind of got to see that like all these actors who were famous, like when they would say cut, kind of became normal people. And you got to see that this scene you saw in the high school, that there was like a lighting guy over here and a gaffer over there and a sound guy and a boom guy and, all these things that when they said cut, let's go get coffee. And you're like, oh, I see. There's this whole team that kind of puts these things together that you just watch or listen to as entertainment and go, oh, this is fun. So I think having that sense that like, these are all jobs people have. It's not like there's no magic going on. I mean, there's magic in the talent, but the actual production is like a bunch of people doing a job.
Were you also seeing concerts in the same like perspective, like side of stage, seeing all the working?
And so the first concert I remember seeing is my folks took me to Jimmy Buffett at the Universal Amphitheater, and apparently I walked in and said to my mom, "It smells like Dad's office in here." I remember them taking us to Tom Petty at the Universal Amphitheater, and that Stevie Nicks, Damn the Torpedoes tour, and Stevie Nicks came out and sang Stop Dragging My Heart Around in the Insider. And even as a kid, I remember being like, "Ooh, this is this is something. But the really crazy ones is we saw the Blues Brothers at the Universal Amphitheater with John Belushi, Dan Aykroyd, Booker T and the MGs featuring McIntyre Murphy and Paul Schaefer. And we were so close. We were in the front row, essentially, except that everyone there was an adult, except me and my tiny brother. Because I was probably like, I don't know, 10. My brother was probably like 6 or 7. Like, we were little kids. We're in the front row, and they would open the set with dun 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 dun, and Jake would come out, and Elwood would come out, and he had the briefcase full of blues. That was our album at the time, handcuffed to his hand, and then Jake would pull out the key, unlock it, and then they'd open it, and that's where his harmonicas were, and then they'd start the next song. And so they came out, and as they're doing that, Dan Aykroyd sees these 2 little kids front row center, and into the microphone goes, "Hey Jake, want to rob a couple of kids?" And we're like in the front going, "Yes, rob us!" And then we also we saw Eddie Murphy on the Delirious tour and the Raw tour. And I don't remember which story this is from, but on one of those, we went backstage. And my brother had to go to the bathroom. And so my mom, Bobby, our stepdad, "Oh, Dorothy, just go find a bathroom backstage. I'll hang here with Frankie at the bar." He's probably ordered I'll have a triple whiskey here. And they disappeared for a really long time. And Bobby's like, "Where's your mother? Where's your mother? We got to get out of here." And we look around, and the backstage dressing room for the headliner back at the amphitheater back in those days was essentially had glass walls. It was sort of like a glass room in the middle of the backstage area, which when I think about it, it's very strange, but whatever. Sure. That's what it was. We see Eddie Murphy in his purple outfit holding leather outfit, holding my brother, going like, "Hey man, who let this kid in here? Like, what the hell's going on?" And of course he was, because there's no reason a kid that young possibly should have been at the show with the amount of cursing and all the stuff that he's doing. Right. But somehow my mom just went to the nearest bathroom, which was Eddie Murphy's backstage bathroom, and took him there, and he grabbed Brecken and was kind of showing him off to people. Isn't this adorable? But again, those kind of moments, it's like Eddie Murphy was just a guy at that point, tripping on like little kids. He's still just a guy, right? Just with at that, I think it was at that show, another moment that my brother and I both cite as being kind of an early moment of like, oh man, maybe this showbiz thing, maybe I could do that, is Danny DeVito, who at the time was star Taxi, which was a huge show, and he played Louis De Palma, and he was an asshole on the show. He was raking everyone over the coals. And so we see Danny DeVito backstage at the Eddie Murphy show, and we're kind of like, Mom, look, it's Louis. It's Louis De Palma from Taxi. It's the guy from TV. And she's like, yeah. And I'm sure he saw us. And he's probably, "Hey kids," and they're like, "Yeah, go talk to him." We're like, no, he's mean. He always yells at Latka. Alex Rieger and him don't get along. So we wouldn't say anything, and he, I'm sure, just saw this going down, and because he's a really nice guy, and he's a famously nice guy, he just walked right up to himself, and I said, and I quote, "Hi kids, I'm Danny DeVito from TV's Taxi. Nice to meet you." And we're like, "Hi." And then he just, "Hey," and he talked to my parents and talked to us like adults. You know what I mean? Just talked to, "Hey, what are you kids doing?" "Oh, yeah, Eddie's great, blah, blah, blah." And kind of walked away. And I just remember both Brecken and I kind of going like, whoa, because he was like one of the biggest people on television, and was just a guy that walked up and talked to a couple of dumb kids. And I think that kind of stuff, like if you live in Kansas City in 1982 or 84 or whatever, the idea that you could start a band, get signed, do it as an actual career, the idea that you could be an actor, any of that stuff is like,
you're seeing possibility in a completely different, in a very unique light. A fractional amount of people have this kind of experience.
Absolutely. And I think that we were both really, really lucky, and obviously like inspired by all this, because both my brother and I went into our professions, me as a musician and later as a filmmaker, and him as an actor and later as a filmmaker. He started when he was like 6, Like he was a child, one of those little kids that was doing commercials and stuff.
Right.
And I started playing guitar at 12 and had a band playing the Troubadour by 14. We sucked, but I was confident enough to try it, and I had this notion that I could do it because I was seeing people because I saw people do it, and sometimes very unlikely people, like Danny DeVito didn't strike you as a huge rock star, but boy, what a talent!
Was there an element of the exposure that you were getting that lent itself to having a sense that those people were somehow your peers already, and that gave you confidence?
Not in the examples I just gave you, but I'll tell you where that was the case. Is a few years later, I became really good friends with Dweezil Zappa.
Pretty good at the guitar.
Yeah, real good at the guitar. And in fact, our history with the Zappas goes even further back. We went to summer camp, and second grade was around the time that I met Moon and Amit. And Amit was Amit was my brother's age, so about 3 years younger than me. Moon was maybe 2 years older than me, but we all went to the same grade school. And then later on to the same junior high school and high school. And I met them when I was real young, but when I was in about 6th or 7th grade, I met Dweezil. And Dweezil had just recorded the My Mother's a Space Cadet single, which was produced by Eddie Van Halen and Frank Zappa. And they lived up off of Outpost, off of Mulholland Drive, in the famous Zappa house that had the Utility Muffin Research Kitchen, which was his studio where he made all the magic. And I had already read about Dweezil. I had the connection through knowing his siblings, but at that point, I was a Van Halen freak, and I was already starting to play guitar, but I was not very good. I could do like Sex Pistols songs and, Chuck Berry licks and stuff, but I couldn't like shred or anything. And this was the era of the shred, you had to shred. So I met Dweezil through his brother Amit, and I went to the house, and he had like these guitars that like Eddie Van Halen had given him. And I kind of immediately gravitated towards Dweezil and was like, oh man, can you show me this? Well, yeah. And he would pick the guitar up and play like Eruption, like note for note. He's 12. I'm 12. He's 12. He was like just over a year older than me, but I was 12, maybe he was 13 at this time. And he could tap and do Mean Streets and do like all the stuff that for me was like impossible. You know what I mean? And he was my age and could do it and didn't even look like he was working that hard to do it. He had so the first time I met him, I basically I had him show me some of his guitars and then asked him to play a bunch of stuff. And he was like, sure. And he's like, oh, you play too, huh? He hands me a guitar and I'm like, and he's like, yeah, let me hand that back. And I think he kind of took it upon himself to teach me how to play guitar, or at least improve my playing.
Yeah.
And probably just based on the fact that it's like, well, if this kid's going to hang around the house, I can't have him sucking like that. If he's going to pal around with me, he's got to have a few more chops under his belt. So he actually made me, I still have it. He made me a how to play guitar book, like hand drew it with tabs and scales and drawings in between of the Thingfish, which was Zappa's Creature at the time from a record called Thingfish.
Yep.
And he basically was like, this is all the stuff you need to know. And that's kind of how I really got started as a real guitar player, in terms of actually having some direction and some instruction.
Right.
And someone who was my age, but far more talented than me, but he lived up the street, and we could go and play handball or go to the tennis club that was nearby and go, fuck around. You know what I mean? Yeah, and do kid stuff. And so like when I had my first rehearsals, he was always there. When he was rehearsing his bands or doing whatever he was doing, I was always there. I was in the recording studio with him when he recorded his first ever lead vocal on his solo record, Having a Bad Day. I recorded my first demos at the Utility Muffin Research Kitchen. Dweezil gave me not my first electric guitar, but my second, third, and fourth. Gave me my first amp, gave me my first effects racks, pedals, everything. Like anything, he would get endorsements, and then when he was a really nice guy. Amit as well. Amit and I, as time went on, I actually probably got closer to Amit in the longer arc of our, because I've known these guys now, 50 something years. Amit and I probably are now a lot closer.
Right.
Dweezil and I, just because life, he tours now, I tour now, we just don't see each other that much. We kind of drifted apart a little bit, I guess. But when I was a kid, that access to his level of talent and the inspiration of even considering that someone my age could be. I'll tell you this right now, too. That moment, that first moment that I played with Dweezil, he was better than I am now. Now, I don't mean soulful songwriting. I'm not talking about any of that stuff. But in terms of just sheer chops,
technical, yeah.
At 12, he was the best guitar player I've ever seen now.
Right.
He was so good, and it's such a natural ability. It wasn't focused. It wasn't harnessed. It took him years to write great songs because that's a totally different skill set.
Yeah.
I think that what I maybe developed quicker than him was I really focused on songs early on and performing and, really becoming like a good live performer. That stuff wasn't a focus for him. He was into being the next Eddie, like a virtuoso, and that's a different.
Well,
that's a different practice routine.
The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Frank is probably my favorite lead guitar player. He's just like unruly.
I'm with you. I think he actually is super underrated as a lead guitar player. I like Zappa as a lead player. I would even say, another big bold statement, more than Hendrix. I love Hendrix, but to me, Zappa can do everything that Hendrix can do, but Hendrix cannot do everything Zappa can do. And don't get me wrong. Again, I'm not talking about songwriting.
Not a technical guy, and Frank is arguably technical, but he's.
But when you hear some of those like loose blues rock solos from like the Apostrophe Overnight Sensation era, like that's dude, his stuff there is as good as anybody ever that touched the instrument, or certainly in that genre. And again, I'm separating musical ability, or in this case, lead guitar playing ability, as opposed to songwriting. I would say Hendrix is the overall better, more accessible songwriter. Everyone knows Hendrix songs because they're incredibly great, perfect pop songs with just all the right influences and just enough blues and swagger, but still with the hooks. Zappa wasn't that kind of writer, and I would say that a lot of his music is not for most people.
Sure.
So, of course, as an overall sort of performer, singer, songwriter, I would put Hendrix at the top. But as far as, for me, lead guitar playing, Zappa.
What an incredible experience for you as a young person, because a conversation that I've had on these two couches dozens of times is about folks our age and in the range of our age talking about what a mystery music was. Everything about it was mysterious because, not you grew up in the city, you had cable television.
Yeah.
Not everyone had cable television.
We had Z Channel, which was weird cable television.
You couldn't even see a music video sometimes to see how people made, like, I didn't know what was a keyboard and what was a guitar.
Yeah.
I didn't know, like, I heard about the recording studio. You can do this stuff in the recording studio. I just thought, well, people can't do that in person. Like it's studio magic.
Yeah.
It's magic, but now it is. Like, but you were seeing all this stuff. You were seeing how the sausage was made.
Yeah,
which
very
is
lucky.
Or the muffins in this case, which is unbelievable.
I'll tell you,
enviable.
So one time when Frank was making the album Jazz from Hell, and that was when he was in his Synclavier phase. So essentially, he had kind of, as much as he could, was trying to move away from traditional rock and really wanted to do full-blown classical compositions with an orchestra, and he was doing that, but he had to fund those orchestras, so it was really expensive for him to make an album with the London Symphony Orchestra, because he had to like pay them all union fees and go fly over there and rehearse with them and rent a big not even a studio, like rent a hall, and all this stuff. So he essentially was losing money every time he did what he really wanted to do, which was orchestral music. And so the rock
are tough all over me too.
Yeah. So the rock stuff for him, because he was a rock star, that was sort of the way at some point to kind of pay the bills to do the orchestral stuff. Then when he discovered the synclavier, which was an early, for those of you that don't know, an early version of sampling and an early version of essentially MIDI programming, right. So you could write an orchestra part and pull up sounds to represent the woodwind section and the string section and the brass and each instrument. It was, the early 80s, so these sounds weren't exactly as authentic as they are now with digital technology and sampling and stuff, but it was as close as anyone could get. And so Frank got a synclavier and was an early pioneer in doing these really insane, very bold pieces of music that he was just programming every single instrument himself. Yeah. And it was a way for him also to make these compositions without having to pay all these studio musicians. Now, for me, especially as a little kid, and for anyone at that time, no one knew what the hell this piece of gear was. And the idea of even sampling wasn't really a thing yet. I mean, people were sampling in hip hop, but it was still old school, where it's like you'd sample the record and plug the record right in. And you know what I mean? It was this before there was cutting and pasting.
Turntables.
Yeah, turntables and tape and splicing tape. And so anyways, Dweezil and I, so Frank wouldn't even start work until midnight, and he would work till 9 in the morning and then go to sleep. So the only time you ever caught Frank was when he was like briefly up for a nap in the middle of the day, or if you stayed up really late at night. So sometimes I'd catch him in the kitchen and he'd make me a cup of coffee or a peanut butter sandwich, because anyone that knows that's all he ate. I actually had peanut butter sandwiches made by Frank, which is kind of awesome. But we would stay up late because we wanted to catch Frank when he was recording, because even Dweezil, who was his son, was still kind of mystified. Like, whoa, Frank, if he's in the studio, we got to get in there. We're like, oh, my dad's going to be in the studio. Bob Stone was his engineer. Him and Bob are going to be up all night. We got to stay up and we can go in there and hang out. And Frank was cool. Like, he'd just let us hang out and be fly on the wall. Like, it wasn't like, get out of here, you kids. Because he wasn't doing drugs. Yeah. You know what I mean? There was nothing there we couldn't see. It was more like, hey, you guys want to stay up till 4 in the morning? And yeah, sure. Right. Why not? So he's messing on the synclavier, and I asked him, I go like, what is that thing? It's a keyboard? Yeah, not really. And he kind of explained it to me, and I was like, I don't really understand what you're saying. And he goes, okay, hold on. And he puts a microphone up, and he goes, make a funny sound. Very Frank thing to say. Right. And I was like, bleh. And so then he feeds it into a keyboard and goes, now press this key. And I go, bleh, press up, bleh. Blah, 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 blah. I'm like, whoa. And he goes, now watch this. And he feeds it to a drum pad and gives me the drumstick and goes, hit that drum pad. And blah, whoa, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like playing and do it with my voice coming back at me. Boom. Okay, I get it. I understand what this thing does now. And he goes, well, now I can use that to make orchestral music without having to hire an orchestra. And I was like, wow, what does that sound like? So this is like out of the Memorex commercial. He turns everything on. This is in the main console of the Utility Muffin Research Kitchen. Right. He turns all the faders up, everything to 10, every gadget, anything that's got a light, and he puts me in the control seat, and he cranks a rough mix of the song G-Spot Tornado, which he later won his only Grammy is for G-Spot Tornado, ironically enough.
You're 12.
Yeah, and I'm like 12, and I don't even know if I understood what the hell the G-Spot Tornado was even referring to. But he played, and he put me there, and he cranked it, and it's an insane piece of music. Go and listen to it now. It's insane. And if you can imagine being a 12-year-old kid and hearing that at 10, blasting, and the lights and the faded, I was just like, whoa, my God. And like the song finishes, and he's like, that's what I'm doing with that piece of gear. And I'm like, wow. So, I mean, how can you not, how could I have not become a musician with moments like that? I mean, what do you do? How do you unpack that and go like, well, that was fun for a Tuesday. Tomorrow I'll go ride dirt bikes and it'll be like the same thing. It's like, no, like that's stuff kind of like knocks you off kilter, and you sort of spend like the whole rest of your life off kilter because of that, or on kilter, maybe, you know.
That's insane.
Yeah, I'll tell you one other, because I know you're a Zappa fan. If I can give you one other, indulge you for.
I'm happy to talk about Zappa, but let's get
I got one more story though that's a good one. But anyway, go ahead. We'll continue.
No, let's have it.
Okay, so this is a story that I don't think I've ever told outside of the moment that I had with him, because this is not in the book. This is not in anything. You can edit this out later.
I read his book twice.
Yeah, me too, actually. Because I read it when it came out, and then I read it fairly recently again, and was kind of blown away by it. Anyway, so he told me one night. So he actually scored a documentary about the Exxon Valdez spillage. This is sort of a lost piece of work. He scored this documentary about it, and there was a screening of it at the Directors Guild, and I just happened to be over at their house that day, and it was like, hey, Frank, you want to come with us? We're all going with Frank, because I was always Other Frank.
Did you have a special name?
No, he was Frank, and I was Other Frank.
Other Frank.
Yeah, I was Other Frank. Even Frank would be like, hey, Other Frank. So they asked if I wanted to go to this thing, and they had 2 limos, one for the boys, me and Dweezil, and I don't think Amit went, me, Dweezil, and Frank, and then Moon and Diva and Gail went in the other limo. So now I'm in a limo, and I just the previous night seen Buddy Guy play, and at a club in Hollywood. So this had to have been like 89, maybe. I'm still in high school or maybe college at this point. And Willie Dixon was at the Buddy Guy show and got up, and this is kind of a crazy story too. He got up and he wasn't playing bass anymore. He was just there to support Buddy Guy. I'm a big blues freak, and I have my dorky little like white blues band, and we're all Buddy Guy freaks, and we recognize Willie Dixon because he's got the hat. He looks just like Willie Dixon. And so remember back in the days with the clubs when the guy with the Polaroid would be around, $10 for a Polaroid of you and your gal at the table. So we go, Polaroid guy, you got to come with us. And we take him up and we go, Mr. Dixon, we're huge fans. Can we take a picture? He's like, sure, boys. Puts us all in the booth. I still have this photo of me and Willie Dixon. So then Buddy plays, crushes it, of course. Yeah. And he calls Willie up. And this was another big moment.
Was that Damn Right I Got the Blues?
This was before Damn Right I Got the Blues, and this was it was before that, but just before it. That was sort of his comeback record, and I want to say that might have been like 90, 91. This was like 89, like right before that. Right. And I think so he calls up Willie, and me and my friends had like front row table at the show, and it's me and the guitarist Andy Medway from Highway 61, which was my band at the time, and our buddies, and actually one of them was Marin Sander Holtzman, son of Jack Holtzman, the guy that signed the MC5, Love, The Doors, and the Stooges. So we're all at the front watching this, and he calls up Buddy, and Buddy comes up and kind of just gives a sermon to the audience, like, Buddy gets the band down, calls Willie up, and Willie kind of just gives this speech, and his speech basically was, you're lucky to have us here because we are the last of a dying breed. The blues man, as you know it, is not going to be around forever. We're old guys. We ain't going to be around. And when we're gone, there ain't no more left. It's up to you. I swear to God, he points right at me. Probably just saw the young kids at the table. We represent the next generation. But he pointed. Got your
picture with him?
Yes, I had gotten the picture. So maybe all I know is, again, I'm young, 18 maybe, and Willie Dixon on stage pointed right at me and said, it's up to you to carry on this music. How the fuck do I not become a musician? Willie Dixon told me I had to. Frank Zappa told me I had to.
Yeah, well, you're going to listen to those fellas.
You got to listen to these guys. So I tell this story to Frank. I'm like, Frank, because I knew Dweezil didn't care about the blues. He loved George Lynch and Warren DeMartini. Yeah, sure. But I loved the blues, and I knew Frank loved the blues. And anytime I was with Frank, I was kind of looking for anything I could talk to him about, because I was always in awe. And I was like, oh, he'll want to hear my buddy guy, Willie Dixon. I met Willie Dixon.
He was Johnny Guitar Watson guy, right?
Yeah. Johnny Guitar Watson played on a lot of that stuff. So I tell Frank my story from the night before about meeting, Willie. And he goes, oh, yeah, man, wow, that's good. He goes, what the hell were you doing at a Buddy Guy concert? I'm like, oh, I'm a big blues fan. He goes, you are? I could see. He's like, well, Dweez. He didn't tell me. Yeah, little other Frank's got good taste. So he's like, I remember playing the Mother's Invention. We played with Buddy Guy and Junior Wells at a few festivals. And I go, oh, wow, that's cool. I said, you know who my favorite is Muddy Waters. Did you ever meet Muddy or play with Muddy? And he goes, no, I never played with him, but I kind of met him. And here's the story that I've never, ever heard anyone else tell, which is he said that his parents, when he lived in Cucamonga, sent him to blues camp. And blues camp was in like upstate New York, and they sent him on a train by himself cross country, presumably as a teenager, I would think. I don't know that detail, to go to blues camp. And he said Junior Wells was one of the instructors at blues camp, and he named a few other blues people that were there to like teach, presumably young middle class white kids how to play the blues. He had a train layover, a train stop in Chicago on his way to upstate New York. And he had like an hour to kill. So he took his quarter or dime or whatever, and he called Chess Records. And this is not famous Frank Zappa. This is teenage Frank Zappa. And he says, hello, my name is Frank, and I'd like to speak to Muddy Waters, please. And they go, well, Muddy's not here. He's home today. Because remember, Muddy was the house bass player for Chess, so he was probably there most of the time. But it was like, no, he's not home. Would you like the number? And he goes, why, yes, I would. Writes down the number, puts in another dime, calls the number. A woman answers. Hello, and he's, hi, my name is Frank. I'm from Cucamonga, and I'd like to speak to Muddy Waters, please. Hold on. McKinley! Phone call! McKinley Morganfield answers the phone. Muddy Waters. And Frank just talked to him until his fucking dime ran out. On the phone, standing on a wooden crate, on a payphone, talking to Muddy Waters as a kid fan that just called him. And I was like,
on a layover in Chicago.
On a layover in Chicago. And Muddy just talked to him, because why wouldn't you? You know what I mean? And so he was like, yeah, so that's how I met Muddy Waters. I'm like, whoa. I swear to God, that's not I've mentioned that story to his kids, and they don't remember that story. Is that crazy?
They weren't fucking interested in it. So he was probably thrilled to tell you because
he knew I cared.
Had interest.
Yeah. Is that wild?
That's crazy.
So again, it's just like, I mean, all that kind of stuff. Like, how do you not? If I'd become a plumber, it would have been a really, really big waste of all of those incredible opportunities and these incredible sort of access.
Been a really creative plumber.
Might have been a really good plumber, but
creative.
Yeah. Doing all sorts of Dr. Seuss stuff with the pipes, you know what I mean? Asher, like the Pee-wee's Playhouse, like a ball dripping in a bowling ball feeder and stuff. Don't worry, it's gonna work.
Okay, so your basic training, so to speak, was pretty steep.
Yeah.
Like it's unique, to say the least.
Yeah, sure.
And cool. What was your first, like, active gigging band?
Broken Toys was a band that played a bunch of shows, but it was a mix of, like, clubs and high school dances and talent shows and stuff like that, as much as we could. But we were teenagers. We couldn't get into a lot of places. After that, that kind of morphed into a band called Highway 61. And Highway 61, which was at the end of my high school career going into college, was kind of a blues rock band. We were really into the Stones and Stevie Ray Vaughan, Buddy Guy. And then not too far after we were doing that, bands like the Black Crowes, Burning Tree, there was kind of a bunch of blues rock bands that actually got signed and put out some records that sold some records. So suddenly that idea of being kind of a Faces, Stonesy blues band made a little more sense, because when we first started doing it, it didn't really make sense in LA. It was still the hair metal era. But suddenly this blues rock thing's happening, and that was kind of in our wheelhouse. And there was a guy around at that time named B.B. Chung King. I know Slash and Duff know him real well. He was an LA scenester. His whole thing was he was like a Stevie Ray Vaughan, B.B. King type, but he was Hawaiian, Korean, so he was kind of just putting his spin on it, and because of the era, it's like, this is being politically correct. He's like, oh yeah, I'm the Hawaiian Vietnamese, Korean being BB Chung King. I mean BB King. I'll be BB Chung King. Slightly racist, but whatever. It was the time, and he was making fun of himself, so you kind of taking the air out of it.
Sure.
And he was shredding. Like, this guy was so good, and he could do all that stuff, and he looked cool, and he played cool, and he wrote great songs. There was a guy named Bobby Schneck who was in his band, who went on to a lot of stuff. His brother's a big guitar tech. They had the same, we got the same manager as them. And they were a real band in the sense that they had a publishing deal, and they were cutting demos, and they would do gigs where like Slash would get up with them and stuff. And they would play the Cat House at the invite of Guns N' Roses and stuff. And they would tour up and down the coast mainly at this time, and they would do a lot of biker festivals and blues rock festivals and, county fairs and stuff like that. We ended up sharing a manager with them, and despite the fact that we were about a decade younger and about a decade shittier, we were trying our hearts out to do our thing, and we had this opportunity where we could get on as direct support for BB at virtually any gig. So we got a lot of gigs on the road, and that was the first time that I really toured, played out in LA, had to do 2-3 sets a night. Like, hey guys, you're gonna play at this county fair and you have to do 3 sets. We're like, we don't have 3 sets worth of material. Well, you better learn a bunch of covers. So we do, if we were playing a biker festival, we do Born to Be Wild. We had Stormy Monday, Killing Floor, Hey Joe, just Communication Breakdown, all the stuff that a hard rock 70s kind of influenced cover band would play. And then we would mix in our originals. But I mean, man, that's how you learn how to do it. Like, you play, you go on the road, you play, you do 3 sets a night, you play covers, you play originals, you get booed, you get heckled, you get shit thrown at you, you get beat up in the parking lot, you get robbed at a Motel 6. All that stuff happened time and time again. You get handed your ass every single night by the very guy that's bringing you on the road. I mean, when I tell you every night, BB just smoked us. But that's how you learn. That's another one, where it was like, I got this opportunity to see someone up close and then ask them questions and sit in a van with them and watch someone do what I wanted to do way better than me. But it wasn't a threat. He wasn't trying to bury me. He was just that much better than me. But for me as a kid, yeah, but what a learning experience, you know what I mean? Because I literally got crushed every single night. But you know what makes you become a great performer and great guitar player? Getting crushed every single night for 3 years. You know what I mean? By the end of that 3 years, no one could crush me. You know what I mean? I got thick skin, man. I learned how to play in every circumstance. I got just my ass handed to me time and time again. But that becomes, that's where you build your character. That's where you build your strength. That's where you build your live chops. That's where you build your ability to read the room and know, I can get up there with someone who's better than me in some levels, but there's areas that they're not better than me at. And I can sense that out quickly and go, okay, tonight I'm going to lean on this because this guy's got this thing. You know what I mean? The live performer in you, you have to fail to succeed. You have to fail. And then that's when you're tough enough to succeed,
Right. You were bit by the bug immediately.
Yeah.
Because I'm assuming here we are, I'm thinking 35 years later and you're still touring.
Yeah, more than ever now. most of my peers are trying to ease it back. I've been quadrupling my effort, I'm playing six touring bands right now, my own bands, and I do a lot of guitar for hire stuff, playing for other bands, and all those bands are on the road touring. And so it's a lot of material. I practice more than I ever used to practice, because when you're playing all your own stuff, what are you going to practice? You know what I mean? Right. But when you're learning other people's material and playing a different role in their band than you play in your band, and you're getting paid to execute that material essentially perfectly every night, you have to make sure you know your stuff. If
you're going to do something, you might as well do it well.
Yeah.
Especially if you want to keep doing it.
Yeah. Or get paid to do it, So that for me has been, somewhere around the pandemic, I kind of rethought my whole thing. And I don't mean just music, my life. It was was always passionate about music, but I had a kid. I was a single father for a long time, and the idea of being like this punk rock guy in a van, not around, or being a freelance guy where it's like, well, this month I don't have rent, and next month I might, like that didn't work for me. I had to get a career that could sustain itself and support a kid. So for a long time, I kind of pivoted, not away from music. I kept playing music, making albums, still played gigs, but not so much touring. And I got into directing and producing and writing books and all the other stuff that I do. And then that momentum, doing all that production stuff, it got its own momentum. And suddenly I was like on staff at NBC and then at Fender and these other companies. And even though I was doing a creative job, being a director, a producer, a writer, it still had a very 40 hours a day desk job element to it. You have a quota to meet, and when you're not on set, they want you at your desk doing your notes and this, that, and this. And like that really wasn't where I saw myself, like I don't know. But you just kind of keep going in life. You just keep going to make shit happen. And the pandemic was the first time, and it wasn't my doing, where like everything just stopped. And so my career stopped, music stopped, the ability to go out and socialize stopped. And for a little while, we didn't even know if it was going to get back to normal or what way it would, or
people were saying it was going to be 7 years.
Yeah. Or like, and maybe they'll never be touring again the way that so suddenly, I was sort of forced to rethink things. And part of that for me was going, well, this is where your career's at. Is this where you actually want it to be? Or is this just where it took you? Right. And for me, that answer was, this is where it took me. And a lot of that was the responsibility of being a father. But I'm still a father, don't worry. But she's 21 now. She's in college. She got a scholarship. She's a smart kid. She's now, just like my mom, studying biology. And she's doing great. And when I realized, then I got remarried. I had a team member, and the idea that I had to have this desk job version of it, I was like, well, a lot of that was for the infrastructure of like health insurance and a 401k and all these things for my kid. But now my kid is an adult in college, got a scholarship. She's doing great. Things are paid for. Like, I don't have to do that version of a job anymore. Could I go freelance? A lot of directors and writers and stuff, they're freelance, which I always thought was too big of a risk. But I was like, well, maybe I'll give this a year. I'll go freelance as a director and just triple down on playing music and start going out for more jobs outside of my own projects. And let's see where that takes me. If it goes belly up, then I'll just go back and go get a job at some TV network and be a line producer. But that was about 3.5 years ago. And that first year went well. And the second year went better. And then I got in Fear. And then I got in Leaving's country band Range War. And then I started playing with Handsome Dick Manitoba. And I got a lot more session work. And suddenly, like my life kind of changed, and it changed in exactly the way that I wanted it to. And where I always wanted it to be, but it took 50 years to get there,
At our age, it's pretty important to start approaching things with sort of clearing out any potential regrets. I never want to be laying in a bed. If I have that experience of dying in a bed, maybe I won't. Maybe I'll die on the way home. But, if so, great. I'm pursuing happiness.
Yeah.
And I think that is just below being, if you have the responsibility of parenting, that's probably, you should be happy and present that to your kids. But I'm glad that you're pursuing a fulfilling life.
Yeah,
as challenging as it is sometimes.
I think being happy is important, and I think sometimes we all, and I know I'm guilty of this, but we all work so hard that like our actual happiness and contentness gets backburnered for just like, I got to make money, I got these responsibilities, I got to do this thing, I got to think of my kid, I got to think of this, I got to think, all these things, which are all justified. It's like, These are big, heavy elements of our life and provide a lot of motivation. But at the same time, you have to figure out what makes you happy, and whether that's work related, not work related, whether it's, if you're a creative type like we are, an artist, that version of happiness might be different from someone who's not that way.
Sure.
But the point is that we all have things that make us happy, and we all have desires in our lives and stuff that we want to do, where it's like, man, what I really want to do is that. I'm doing this, but what I really want to do is that. You have to figure out the closest you can get to that. Not everyone has the luxury of in my case, like playing guitar, or writing songs, or doing these things that potentially you can go and monetize and try to make a career out of. But we all have things that make us happy. You know what I mean? Things we like to do, people we like to be with. So I think that's the important thing, is as you get older, just figuring out what your version of that is and making it a priority. For me, it worked out because my happiness is music, and music, as it turns out, is also the thing that is my career. You know what I mean? I mean, that's just how lucky, you know what I mean? But also, I also go back to, like, man, the whole thing for me, it started with a piece of wood with 6 pieces of wire on it. Like, that's literally, I have grown to love the guitar, like, in a more significant way, I think, than I did when I was younger. Because to me, it's like a guitar is like if a baseball bat. If you're like, a baseball player, it's like you can literally, like, this. It's a piece of wood. It's a piece of wood with strings on it. It's not that complicated. But man, you can do this. This piece of wood has taken me around the whole world. Yeah. It's introduced me to my heroes. It's constant source of creativity, constant source of happiness, constant source of inspiration. It's a piece of wood, but something about it and what I can do with it, what other people can do with it. I mean, what a lucky, beautiful thing to have even figured out that thing was meant for me. Because I sucked at everything before I played guitar. Like, I tried soccer, I sucked. Football, we're American boys. We're trained to do sports when we're like sports. You got to play football. You got,
soccer's coming up. Are you going to sign up, Junior?
Yeah, exactly. T-ball, then softball, then baseball. It was like, I was terrible at all of them. Just worse at every sport. I tried track and field, sucked at that too. I just sucked at everything. The first time anyone handed me a guitar, this kid struggled to play Smoke on the Water, handed it to me, and I just played it. And he was like, "Whoa, how long have you been playing?" I'm like, "Never. I just
10 seconds."
And he goes, "Oh, you're a natural." I never heard anyone say I was a natural at anything besides being stupid. You know what I mean? My dad used to call me dazed because I was always just dazed, spaced out. So for me, like, the whole thing is such a blessing and a beautiful path, like that somehow this kid put a piece of wood in my hands, and it turns out that was like my missing limb. And I've spent my entire life pursuing what I can do with that piece of wood. It's crazy, and here I am talking to you about it, going to Europe this year, playing in 6 bands, playing in Fear, who was like one of the reasons I started playing music. It's crazy, because of this thing, because of this object,
right. So I want to talk about your other bands that you're playing in, and my segue into that would be growing up, you were around all of these famous people. It seems like maybe you became acclimated to being around famous people. You weren't intimidated by big personalities. However, you still have idols.
Sure.
And I'm wondering, how does that come into play as you continue your career? You start actually meeting people that you look up to, that, even some punk rock. Like, when I've talked about it on here all the time, like, I'm pals with Steve Jones, but when we hang out, my heart rate is still like 5 BPM higher than normal. Yeah. I'm just like, oh yeah.
And it's like you can kind of be a normal person around him, but there's still this awareness deep down that, like, I can't believe it's Steve Jones.
I can't believe this guy is my pal.
Yeah. I think it's definitely been an asset for me as a musician, and as a musician who's done a lot of work as like a side musician to other people. The fact that I don't really trip on people's fame and stuff. I'm not saying, like yourself, that I don't I'm not impressed by it. If it's someone that I admire, like I'm not like so jaded where if I meet Iggy Pop and be like, yeah, whatever, dude. It's like, whoa, this is Iggy, man. This is heavy. But I also realize he's a musician and I'm a musician. And then if we were put into a position of making music together, at that point, we just got to get the work done and make the music. So you kind of have to put all that stuff aside. So I think that for me, one of the reasons why I get a lot of work as a sideman is that I'm no drama, pretty easy to get along with. I'm listening. A lot of it's listening, which I wasn't as good at when I was younger, but I've gotten much better at. And also I just don't trip. Like maybe for the first minute you talk to someone, you kind of have your like, oh man, yeah, I had that record when I was a kid. I loved it so much. Anyways, let's go to work. And then at that point, you're just two musicians in a room trying to learn the material or write a song or do whatever. I did a couple albums, but a whole band and tour with James Williamson.
Right.
And my band's called the Walkin Cheetahs. We're named after a James Williamson song, Search and Destroy. That was big for me. Big. But the reason why I got more than a night's work with him was because I didn't act like it was big, and I just sang my heart out and did what I was told, listened to the direction he gave, and was chill to work with, And a lot of times musicians are kind of just looking for like, I just want someone that's good and chill. I don't want a big personality. And don't get me wrong, if I'm the front man, well, I'm going to be a big personality because that's my job as the front man. But if I'm the rhythm guitar player or the co-songwriter or whatever, and especially if it's to someone who's, it's their project, then I'm there as a support player, and therefore they don't need me to come in with all this
hoopla. Listening understand that, especially for touring musicians, 45 to 90 minutes typically is how much time you spend on a stage. And there's that business that has to be square, right?
Yeah.
That's got to be high and tight. That you got to be there ready to go.
Yeah.
But the other portion of the 24 hours of the day, you are still around these folks.
Yeah, and they have to tolerate you.
You've got to be able to be.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I think probably being around, not just the Zappas too. I mean, the Zappas, for one thing, they took us to a lot of cool shit. So I met a lot of famous people when I was young. Lots. Like we went backstage and met Aerosmith, Van Halen, Motley Crue, went to the movies with Rat, like all sorts of crazy stuff. So I wasn't tripping when I would meet people like that. But also my brother became a famous actor. And that's a whole other thing. You know what I mean? Like we'd go out just on family stuff and it could be like a thing. You know what I mean?
What was your brother in?
He's so his name is Meyer, and he was kind of one of the big like 90s guys. He's Travis Birkenstock in Clueless. He's in Go. He's in The Craft. He's in Can't Hardly Wait. He's in Road Trip. He's the guy who makes the porn, has to go get the porn. In Road Trip, he's in Rat Race. He's also a musician. He played drums with Tom Morello in The Night Watchman, and he knows Duff and he knows Slash and all those guys. He's much like me. He's been around L.A. forever, kicking it around, doing it since he was a little kid. Him and Seth Green, or he's one of the early and still collaborators on Robot Chicken with Seth Green, and he also, if you watch King of the Hill, he's the voice of Bobby on King of the Hill. So he's been around doing it forever. And is another lifer, like us. Like he's doing the same thing that he started doing when he was 6 years old, because Danny DeVito and Eddie Murphy gave us that inspiration, the White Shadow, and all these little moments that made us kind of go, well, maybe I could do this.
I imagine that there are parallels in sort of the pendular spoils of rock and roll in acting. Is that accurate? Or?
Yeah, but I would say Brecken, and some of this maybe was a bit of the Zappa influence, but much like the Zappas, certainly at that time, Brecken never drank or smoked or did drugs. I, on the other hand, was kicked out of every single school and arrested. And I rolled my car off Mulholland Drive when I was 16 down a 500-foot cliff. Like when I was a kid, man, I was trouble. Like I really was like a lot. But I think because I was the older brother and I was constantly getting in so much like big trouble, Brecken kept it cool. He kept it tight. He just kind of did his own thing. So even though he came up in probably what you'd look back on now as kind of a hedonistic time, the Beverly Hills 90210 Melrose Place era of Hollywood. He was going to Beverly High School and he's an actor and he's on all these shows and stuff. But he wasn't doing drugs and he wasn't really partying, and he might go out to events with his friends, but he was going to the event, not to be a maniac. So
what's that like?
Yeah, I don't know. I still can't relate to that whole idea of the restraint that he has. But so I was probably doing a little bit more of the kind of bad boy stuff, but at a low rent level because, he was actually famous and sort of avoiding that lifestyle, whereas I wasn't famous, was really trying to get to that lifestyle. Right. I just clunkily, I was doing all the blow. It's just, it was way shittier blow, and I had to pay for it. Acme stuff. Yeah. So, I mean, we, but like I said, we were also, if at that time when we were teens, if our closest compatriots were the Zappa kids, well, they were all sober too. And like they would go to cool events and take us along, but they weren't going and partying and stuff. So any partying that I was doing as a teenager, if I was going to go smoke weed or I was doing that away from all those people. Those were with my ne'er-do-well friends from high school. I actually, when I was high school, even got a party. And by a party, I mean do drugs, with Sam Kinison when I was a kid.
Jesus.
Yeah, because we went to the NAMM show, Dweezil and I and Matthew and Gunnar Nelson and Amir Dirac all took a limousine to go to the NAMM show. And then the NAMM show was going to have this big after party where all the celebrities would jam. And it was at this theater, and Dweezil and Steve Stevens, CeCe DeVille, blah, 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 Leslie West, of course, we're all going to jam. So Dweezil and I split to go to the sound check, and he's up there sound checking, and I'm sitting in this empty theater by myself. And suddenly Sam Kinison, both of his wives, Malika and Melina, the two twins, his opening act, Carl LeBeau, his brother, Bill Kinison, the bodyguard, everyone you'd seen on the Howard Stern show with his entourage just roll up, sit right next to me, behind me. And I'm like, oh my God, it's Sam Kinison. And hey kid, what are you doing here by yourself in the Orange Pavilion Arena or whatever? And I go, I'm a friend of Dweezil's and I'm just waiting for him to finish that. Dweez, that's my bro, man. We're going to go backstage and do some Krell and roll some twisters. You want to come along? Krell, which is what Stephen Pearcy famously called blow, and twisters, which is what he called a joint. He's like, you want to come? And I'm like, yeah. So I go with Sam. We go to this backstage room. They lock the door, break out all the blow, break out the twisters, joints coming left and right. I mean, like mayhem. And I'm like 16, 17.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many hours pass, and we're all just partying, and suddenly it's, Mr. Kinison, you're on in 5 minutes. And I go, what? And he goes, yeah, I'm hosting this thing. And I'm like, what? Dude, you are so high. And he's like, And I realized like my version of high was not Sam Kinison's. I was really high. He was just probably normal. So we go out, and now the whole place is full because we've been partying. I didn't know I did. Now they've let the
time traveled through the evening.
We open the door, and there's CeCe DeVille, and Warren DeMartini, and George Lynch, and Don Dock, and all the celebrities, Steve Stevens, and all these guys standing there. And I'm kind of walking through with Sam, like, oh man, this is crazy. Look at all these famous people. And then suddenly I feel this hand, and it's Dweezil, and he's like, Meyer, what the hell have you been? It's been like 4 hours. Other Frank. What the? And I'm like, I'm with Sam. I'm with Sam and Carl. I'm gonna go sit with, and I leave him again, and split, and go with Sam and his posse and watch the whole show. And then by the end, and drinking vodka, underage, all this stuff.
Sure.
And then Dweezil finds me later and kind of pours me into the limo, and I think I was supposed to go home that night, but he had me stay at his place so I didn't have to drive home. But yeah, so I mean,
right,
wild stuff. So yeah, I wasn't tripped. I mean, once you've partied with Sam Kinison, like who's impressive at that point? You know what I mean?
Partying with Rick James probably would have been another level.
Yeah, I mean, there's still people. I'm not really looking to party with people anymore. I think playing guitar, having a cup of coffee or a beer would be just fine. I don't really need to do blow with my heroes at this point. I don't think it's very flattering once you're 50 and beyond to be. You know what I mean? It just looks like you got a serious problem.
How did you end up playing in Fear?
I had a bit of a history with Fear in that at one point we had the same booking agent. So when the Walkin Cheetahs, like in the late 90s, were, in full stride touring mode, we were booked by an agency that represented Fear. And we did a bunch of tours with them. And then when I was playing with Wayne Kramer, because I played in Wayne Kramer's band on and off for about 3 years, I had a run where I was playing with Wayne, Sylvain, Cherie Curry, Dennis Tech, like all my 70s heroes. I was kind of in all their bands. Yeah. And so Wayne, we did some shows with Rollins' band and Wayne, and Leaving opened up a bunch of those shows acoustic by himself, which was really cool. And so I had a little bit of a history. I think I was working at a magazine called Pop Smear Magazine a million years ago, and I interviewed Lee for that. So I had some interaction with him. But the way we got hooked up recently, or a couple years ago, was there was a band in LA that hired me to play guitar for them to sub for their guitar player, and it was opening for the Adolescence in Fear at a theater show in LA. And I just took the gig, got paid whatever I got paid just to learn their 10-song set and play. And the manager of Fear at that point was looking to bring in a second guitar player because for the longest time Lee would sing and play guitar. But I think at some point, and it's a lot. He's been touring a long time, and those songs are ridiculously fast and very difficult, a lot of them. So he stopped playing guitar. He just didn't want to deal with it anymore. But then they were kind of missing the two guitar sounds. So they already had it in their head. They wanted to add another guitar player. And I think he was kind of thinking about who would be right for that. And he was familiar, because he's an LA guy, with the Walkin Cheetahs. He'd seen us back in the 90s. I think he always thought of me as a singer, as a lead singer that plays guitar. But here he sees me playing in this opening band, just playing guitar, and I think he kind of went like, oh, that's the guy. Because he can sing, he's a band leader, but he also clearly can be a side guy. And he obviously can do both rhythm and lead and blah, blah, blah. So he got my number that night and said he wanted to talk to me. And I kind of assumed that maybe it was going to be for like a Leaving solo thing, which it also turned out to be. But essentially they wanted to add me to the band to play the parts that Lee would have been playing. So essentially rhythm guitar. And that's how I got the gig. And I've been in it for about a little under 2 years. The other guitar player, Eric Razzo, who is killer, he does the Philo Kramer stuff, so he's doing all the whammy bar stuff, and I just kind of hold down the rhythm. But those songs are difficult, man. Those songs are songs in 7 and 9 and 5, and there's songs that are 220 BPMs, 240, 260, songs that are 45 seconds long in 7, where you're just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, like brrr, really fast, difficult stuff. And then once I started working out in Fear, they asked me to be in Lee's country band, Range War, and that's when you and I met on the road, because we were doing an acoustic Range War set opening for Duff McKagan. And that's fun too, because honestly, I play punk rock, but not the kind of punk rock that Fear plays. So it really pushed my guitar playing to learn all that stuff. Then while doing that, I'm learning all this old school country stuff, a lot of walk-ups, dun 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 no 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 no, and stuff that again is just a little bit out of my wheelhouse, but how cool to be like getting pushed at this point. You know what I mean? Like, not like it's cool enough to be even making a living playing music, but to actually being constantly challenged at this point in my career is kind of awesome.
Well, you certainly rose to the occasion, and the challenge. I wouldn't have guessed that material was something that was out of your previous wheelhouse. Now it's right there.
Now it is.
Your guys' sets were really great.
The funny part about that, it kind of goes back to the pandemic thing, which is when everything stopped, if you recall, when businesses first started getting back into opening up for the public, there was no entertainment. Yeah. Then it was like, okay, we could have a single performer or a single DJ in the corner outside 30 feet away. And then it's every other table. And, there's all these rules, but like you could, if you were a performer, not a band, they weren't allowing bands on stage because that meant 4 people in a closed space. Right. You could do a set or whatever. So I went, because I had been furloughed from my job at Fender, and then laid off and I didn't have a job. So I went to every single club in Long Beach that would do any kind of entertainment and booked myself a full night residency. So I was doing 4 nights a week at 4 different clubs, doing 3 sets a night, and all acoustic, all by myself, mix of covers and originals. It was whatever I could pull out of my ass. So I'm Bob Dylan, Neil Young, Stones. I was doing It's So Easy by Guns N' Roses acoustic. I was doing Thunder on the Tundra by Thor acoustic, Sanctuary by Iron Maiden acoustic, like, turning them all kind of into these Johnny Cash songs, lots of storytelling and jokes, and it was fun. But I hadn't done anything like that before, and I never saw myself as a guy playing at like a pizza restaurant on a Thursday night. But here I was, and I mean, it was rough, man. It kind of went back to that, like, boy, has it come to this? Like, I'm just, I'm in a pizza place playing a Stone song, and a guy starts yelling at me from the back of the crowd, and he walks up to me, and while I'm playing Dead Flowers, grabs my guitar neck and stops me from playing. And I'm like, excuse me, sir? And he's like, yeah, man, do you know any? And he pulls a tenor out, and he goes, Stones? And it's like my life flashed before me. I'm like, oh my God, is this what my music? I'm getting yelled at for playing Stone songs in a pizza place while playing a Stone song. So I took his 10 and went, send me Dead Flowers, and kept it going. But when I was doing that, I was having these moments of like, what if the music industry never gets back? What if like this is the best it's going to get, is going back to just playing acoustic Bob Dylan covers and stuff?
There are worse fates.
There's worse fates for sure. And look, playing music's playing music. I got joy out of those nights as well, but it wasn't exactly where I saw things going. But just because it's like the universe is, everything prepares you for the next thing. So I did that, and I thought, boy, this is not, this is tough. And then guess what? We're going to do the Range War tour opening for Duff, and I get a call from the manager and said, you know what? I think it's just going to be, I'm thinking about this maybe instead of, because we had like an 8-piece band. And if we were headlining, it's one thing, but to bring out a big band with pedal steel and keyboards and all that stuff to do like opening slots and stuff, like it just didn't financially make sense to bring the whole. So he goes, I'm just thinking out loud. I mean, would you be down for playing acoustic? And what if you and Lee broke the whole thing down to acoustic? And I was just like, yeah, I got it.
Man, I'll tell you what, if we ever do this thing again, you got a band.
Oh, yeah, man, for sure. Dude, we talked about that on the road because you guys would crush that stuff. I love playing that stuff, too. The country music is fun to play, man. I mean, I'm not so much of a fan of the newer country stuff, but old school country is phenomenal. But it's just another one of those things, man. It's like something you think is annoying and stupid and that maybe you're sucking at, turns out was basically preparing me for a few years later when it was like, hey, can you carry a whole show without a band acoustically? And I'm like, yeah, I could do 3 sets in a pizza place on a Thursday if you want.
That's some more boot camp, life's boot camp for you.
Exactly. But it's funny how it works out that way, man. I'm telling you, I just feel like you're constantly being challenged in ways that come back later, like that's all training,
Yeah. Well, you can appreciate that if you have that perspective. If you don't have that perspective, if you don't have PMA, you're going to be woe is me. I'm in a pizza place.
Yeah. That pizza was good, though. I played for worse. I played for hot dogs.
I played for less.
Yeah, I played for beer. I thought I was playing for beer and ended up paying for beer.
I think I've paid to play.
Yeah. Oh, I for sure. Back in the 80s, I mean, they still do it now in some places. But back in the 80s, that was a regular thing in LA. Is the opening bands basically bought the slot.
That's still happening on tours today.
It absolutely is still happening on tours today, and it's happening, and it's in certain LA clubs and stuff. And that's just the way I can't do that anymore. You can't do that anymore. But hey, man, well, you do what you got to do. I did it before.
Showbiz.
Yeah, exactly. You want to play certain spots. That's what you got to do, and whatever. We all have to eat some crow.
What's the and we'll be done soon. You guys did a lot of driving already, and are you guys going to spend the day in Seattle?
Yeah, my cousin lives in Seattle, so we're going to have a drink with her and go out for dinner tonight, and then tomorrow we head back to LA, and then I go out with Fear again in about a week and a half, and then go to Europe to do a tour with Handsome Dick Manitoba of the Dictators, immediately followed by my first solo tour to support the new record.
Yeah.
I'm very excited about.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'll be in LA next week.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to be driving Michael Monroe.
Oh, you told me that.
So
I'm going to for sure have to hook up with you.
I don't know what my time's going to be like, but it'd be great to see.
Yeah, and I want to come to that Rainbow Festival because it's Michael Monroe, who's great. It's Black Oak, Arkansas, which is featuring the legendary Jim Dandy, the David Lee Roth before there was David Lee Roth. And then it's Odin. The pre-Roth. But then it's Odin, who, if you've seen Decline of the Western Civilization Part 2, The Metal Years, is quite a sensation in that movie. It's a wild scene, is all I got to say. They're the band in the jacuzzi and all that stuff. So
that's a legendary conversation.
It's a legendary conversation. I'm dying to see what Odin could sound and look like now. And Faster Pussycat's on it, but I'm not sure what's going on with them because there's been some personal turmoil in that band recently. Right. Or tragedies in that band. But anyway, so either ways, I mean, and Michael, I mean, Hanoi Rocks was huge for me. Like, they were for me, hearing Van Halen was kind of what inspired me to play guitar, but Hanoi Rocks and the New York Dolls is why I want to start a band. Right. You know, the whole idea of a band and having a look and being cool, that stuff to me came from those Hanoi Rocks records. I was super into Hanoi Rocks as a kid. Like, I mean, I can play every one of those songs backwards and forwards. I know them all. Andy McCoy was a big guitar influence for me. Still is.
Yeah. Well, hopefully I'll see you there.
Yeah, I'm going to be there.
Yeah. What a treat! I'm so glad that you made the trip down here.
Thanks,
glad you guys had a good time in Vancouver.
Yeah,
and I'm glad that you made the trip down here to do this. What a cool, full spectrum life you've had.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I'm really just trying to enjoy life these days, enjoy playing music, enjoy being married, enjoy not having a fucking shitty boss that I have to answer to. That for me is a big thing, man. It's just like, I do well in teams and I do well on, listening to other people. It's part of why I get a lot of work as a guitar player and a sideman. But there's a different dynamic when you're at a kind of an office job versus, in a musical outfit or a creative outfit. Yeah. And I think that I was getting at the end of my rope of being in the corporate side of show business. And I'd done it for a long time, but there's just so many instances that were just kind of these soul-crushing moments. And I think one of the greatest things about, for me, like where my life is at these days, is I seem to be, other than personal tragedies, other than people dying, I seem to be out of the business of soul-crushing moments. You know what I mean? I don't have people that are like trying to get me. You know what I mean? I don't have people who are like trying to bring me down or trying to get my team fired or trying to take our budget away that we were told. All the stuff that happens when you're, in show business, really on that other side. And it was so frustrating, because I was really good at what I did. I was a really hard worker, but I just kind of kept getting my ass handed to me. And it got to the point where I was like, this can't be my destiny. I'm sure this isn't my destiny. Right. And so thank God I got out of the business of just regularly being fucking destroyed. You know what I mean? It's a nice change of pace.
Well, I'm glad for you too.
Yeah.
My life is better for having met you on the road.
Thanks, man.
And for having this conversation today. I'm happy you're here. I'm happy you're working.
Thanks,
I'm happy to see musicians working. I used to say, I'm happy to see my friends working, but I'm happy to see I don't even have to like someone's music. I'm just,
yeah.
But I'm happy you're working, and I love the solo record.
Thanks, man.
And I wish you only the best things always.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. I'm going to be out there on the road, so we will run into each other again. I'm definitely going to come see you with Michael Monroe. And whether I'm out there as Frank Meyer, Street Walkin Cheetahs, Trading Aces, Fear, Range War, I'm out there. So come find me.
Let me know if you need a sub for that Fear gig.
Hey, listen, I will let you know. Thanks, man.
Thank you, bud.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
Oh, that was great.
I'm glad to have finally told that Zappa Buddy Guide story. I've never had an arena where anyone, you know what I mean? Like,
what a wild story.
It's a wild story, man.